What's up, guys? So today, as you can tell by my shirt, we'll be talking about Manchester City. I wanted to talk a little bit more of how they've gotten to this point. Right now, they are third in the league. They barely make it through the Champions League, sitting on that 22nd spot, and now they are facing Real Madrid actually tomorrow in the second round, where they lost at the Etihad 2-3. They are through in the FA Cup, but they also lost in the EFL Cup. So that's a little bit of an introduction of how the team is sitting right now, and I'm gonna go a little bit into the details of where do I think things are gonna start to change, and if this is a big issue that we have to be really worried about. It's just gonna be something temporary that Pep Guardiola will be able to solve really quick. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is Rodri's injury, which I think a lot of people blaming on that event to make this streak of losses happen for Manchester City, but I think it goes beyond that. I mean, it is known that in the prior season, when Rodri wasn't playing, Manchester City was struggling a lot because there was no replacement on his position. You could think of Kovacic, you could think of Matheus Nunes as those signings that were supposed to fill in that gap whenever Rodri wasn't playing, and obviously Rodri was the Ballon d'Or this year. So it is a player that really changes the game and changes how you are playing. And obviously, when you start seeing Guardiola's style or Guardiola's formation, whenever he started playing after that dramatic Arsenal game where Rodri got injured, he was trying different kind of formation. He started with the 3 defenders, then he switched again to 4 defenders. Then he was trying to put Kovacic by himself. He tried to put Gundogan, and it's obviously there wasn't a replacement for that kind of role of a defensive midfielder that can really do the Busquets, do the Rodri, those kind of Spanish midfielders that we all know. Until now, with Nico arriving from Oporto, which can be that guy that really takes on that role. We've seen it against Newcastle with a lot of touches, a lot of passes, a lot of basically understanding the game in a different way that the current midfielders were doing, and with the help of Guardiola, hopefully trying to get it to the point of being the replacement of Rodri, or even playing alongside Rodri in a different role when the Ballon d'Or comes back and they are able to play it back together. But I think honestly Nico can be that replacement, and that Rodri injury, big thing that was supposed to be the main reason for Manchester City lose streak, I think can be a little bit forgotten once we have Nico starting to play consistently and not having to be relying on players like Gundogan and Kovacic. There are different kind of players. They were very good in what they do. For example, Kovacic is very good dribbling the ball, and Gundogan is very good getting into those kind of crosses and making a lot of goals, or scoring a lot of goals. But they are not the best defensive midfielders in playing out of the back, because they don't really understand the game as Rodri or Nico that they can do. The next aspect that we have to talk about and that we have to touch on is the age of the players and how Guardiola has been playing with the same team. Obviously, it makes it really easy that you have a group of players that they really understand what you want to do, and it's kind of tough to be rotating or putting things or putting new players in order to be able to make that sustainable growth and know that the Manchester City in 2027 is going to be still successful with the same style of play, but knowing that you have Ederson with 31 years old, the Stefan Ortega is also 32, Kyle Walker, Stones, Ruben Diaz is not old but he's 27, but then you have Ake with also 30 years old. Then you go into the midfield, you have Gundogan, Kovacic, Bernardo Silva, Kevin De Bruyne. Those are all getting past the 30s and not in the striker position, because Haaland is really young. He's probably your star, so it's really easy to have that kind of mindset in those striking positions, because you have Foden also. But Manchester City, I think they have lacked the way of challenging themselves into trying to find better players, or those substitutes of who were the Kevin De Bruyne at that time, or those kind of things that they've done in this winter's transfer, just spending like 265 million in in players that they could have bought maybe in the summer or maybe in the next summer with a little bit more time and patience in order to replace. They brought two centre backs, they bought Marmoush and they bought Rodri. It was basically an age replacement kind of thing, and hopefully with Coutinho, Reis and Rodri and Marmoush, they really can help the team grow further. We've seen Marmoush playing extremely good against Newcastle. I think he can be the next Julian Alvarez in the same kind of role, playing in the left and being able to provide as many goals as Julian Alvarez did. And Nico being that Rodri replacement or that defensive midfielder with a good touch on the ball and knowing what to do in those decisions. And then we have Kusanov and Reis, the Brazilian centre-back, that I think they really need to be the next leaders of the defense, because we've seen Ruben Dias missing a lot of games, we've seen Stones also missing a lot of games, and with Kyle Walker not being as confident, it made the team really be kind of doubt and making a lot of defensive mistakes. And we've seen on the Champions League game against Real Madrid, Ederson missing in a pass that made, obviously you're playing against Real Madrid, so the goal is going to be almost there if you make a mistake. The same with Rico Luis. Maybe Rico Luis is not the best player to be playing as a right back against Vinicius Junior or against Mbappe. Maybe you need somebody else that actually can defend, and is kind of the same thing that probably can happen with Trent Alexander-Arnold. It's really difficult to have those kind of players when you're playing against very good teams. Next topic that we have to talk about is the replacement of players. When you lose a player like Julian Alvarez, and we already talked about losing Rodri as an injury, but Julian Alvarez, it was a transfer. You already knew that it was coming. They paid you a good amount of money. Maybe not what you wanted for Julian Alvarez, because he might be one of the best potential strikers in the future, but 70 million is enough money in order to invest it into another player that could fill into that position. And you wait, let's say 6 months or 7 months, and you see what Julian Alvarez was really, how important he was for your team, and you can see it really in the amount of goals on the top scorers in the team. You see Erling Haaland with 19 goals, which is amazing, but then you see the next one, which is Phil Foden with 7 goals. And now the next one is Guardiola, and I think the next one is already Marmoush. So it's kind of amazing that a player can make that big of a difference in the offensive part of the team. Obviously there is some defensive issues that we can talk more about it later, but that difference of 12 goals between the first one and the second one really makes the difference when you are trying to play a complicated game and all the defenders are focused on Erling Haaland, and there is no a person or a player that can actually make the alternative run where he is not seen, or they are just trying to focus on their part, like Savinho is doing great in my opinion, but for example Doku or Grealish or those kind of players are not doing that part. And I think Marmoush, talking more about the transfer itself, I think he can be that player that really gives Manchester City that hope and put more goals into the scoreline, helping Erling Haaland and maybe attracting more views from the defenders, and probably leaving a little bit more emptiness on Erling Haaland's side, that he can provide more goals and get to the 40s or as many goals as the Norwegian want to score basically. The last two parts that we have to talk about is basically the midfielders and the defenders, and how this has progressively declined with these games that we have seen from Manchester City. We've seen a lot of defensive mistakes, and I think that all comes from not having a defensive leader. We see that Guardiola is doing super good, but he's doing good, obviously, attacking. He's not really the guy that is going to lead the defense like could be Ruben Dias or it was Company at that time. Actually, having Walker leaving the team, was also another leader, can really difficult that setting the line for the offsides, or having Ederson not to miss these kind of mistakes that he has done in these previous games. But going more into the midfielder part, we have seen Guardiola that has tried playing with two as a holding midfielder and one forward. It doesn't really matter, things don't work out. You have Kovacic, you have Matheus Nunes, you have Ilkay Gundogan, Kevin De Bruyne. Those are really Bernardo Silva, all offensive players that don't really know how to play in that defensive or holding mid position, because they normally, or from what I know, they play backwards. That means that they receive the ball and they have somebody on their back and they need to think quick. And when you're playing that defensive mid position most of the time, you have the time to think where to put it, and based on your decision is how the team is gonna be organized, and based on your pass, the team is gonna move this way or the team is gonna move the other way. So it's a really important position, and it basically matters the most where do you put the ball and what decision do you take next, and basically thinking ahead of yourself, knowing what, okay, if Doku is here, I'm gonna pass it to this leg so he can drive into this space. Those kind of things that probably Rodri was doing, Nico is start to do now, but these players aren't capable. They are super good players, that's why they're in Manchester City, but they have other capabilities that are more related to offensive part of it, like the late pass, or that Kevin De Bruyne putting crosses, like he's just placing it with his hand in the basket, or those kind of things that are amazing. But they obviously cannot do it because they have proven in these 10 or 11 games that Manchester City has lost that they cannot play in that holding mid position. To conclude a little bit with the video, we've talked about the things that Manchester City has shown that there could be problems and what has happened, like with injuries, with aging of the squad, with not finding the correct replacements, or with playing people in the midfield that maybe they aren't in the right positions. I wanted to talk about how I think Manchester City is going to progress. I do think that with these signings that they've made, it's going to make a huge difference, because it's going to fill up the replacement that they were needing, and it's going to place Guardiola into a different spot in where he can really teach those kind of kids that he had in Rodri at that time, that he had on probably Bernardo Silva or Kevin De Bruyne when they come in and they started to learn his system, and those kind of brains that are super empty that he can fill up with this tactical knowledge that he has, and he's gonna make, I think, a lot of progress. Hopefully, putting Manchester City closer to the top position in the Premier League. I think it is pretty difficult in this time because of how Liverpool is doing. But other than that, in the Champions League, they play tomorrow against Real Madrid. I don't foresee them passing because of how Real Madrid is at home. But maybe next year they can do something better and hopefully getting closer to a treble again. But other than that, I think Marmoush is going to be a very good signing, Nico is going to be a very good signing, and we'll see how Kusanov and Reis really play in that centre-back position, hopefully getting some leadership from Ruben Dias. So I hope that you guys like this video, and that you can tell me in the comments if you agree or not agree about my opinion about Manchester City, and what would you like to see more in the next videos.